Mike and his two best friends were turning 40, and because of the pressure of family and work, they had fallen out of shape. So they decided to get into shape together. This was going to be their year. They signed up for a fitness program run by a retired Army sergeant. The program was 90 minutes a day, 3 days a week, starting at 6:30 a.m. By lunchtime on the first day, Mike could hardly move. When he woke up the next morning, he tried to get out of bed, but his body refused, and his wife was howling with laughter. On the first day of the second week, Mike was not feeling well. The first week had taken its toll. He had spent the weekend running around to events, and he drank too much at a party. About 15 minutes into the class that Monday morning, he asked the sergeant for permission to sit out 5 minutes and to catch his breath. No was the sergeant's answer. But I have a cramp, and I think I need to stretch it out. The sergeant said, no, that's not your problem. What is my problem? Mike regretted it as soon as those words came out of his mouth. The sergeant said, your problem is you are very fat, you're very lazy, and you are mentally weak. Now shake it off and get back in there before I make you give me 100 push-ups. I could not stop laughing the first time I heard that because the sergeant's response, that's not what I expected. But Mike shares that story because it was good for him. You know, recently, a friend of mine, she called me out for complaining. I didn't realize I was doing it, but I was. And when I was praying over these readings today, this gospel, I actually said, Lord, can you give me something easy? And the challenge he gives in the gospel is actually what I needed to hear because my perspective has been off. Jesus says, who among you would say to your slave who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, come here at once and take your place at table? Would you not rather say to him, prepare supper for me, put on your apron, and serve me while I eat and drink? Later, you may eat and drink. Do you thank the slave for doing what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, we are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done. Do we think of ourselves as slaves? Jesus does. Jesus said, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So a slave is someone who works all day long, and after that, has to work some more. So Jesus, even after he's arrested and tortured, he has to go all the way, even until death. So we're supposed to see ourselves as servants of God, and that means we're not supposed to be surprised when suffering comes our way. We're not supposed to be surprised when people ask us, it has to be a legitimate request, but it's unexpected. We shouldn't be surprised. Now, it's more fundamental. We've talked about this many times. Of course, we're children of God, so we take care of ourselves. But children of God, as we're learning, are also servants of God. And so we have to take care of ourselves, but you also have to be ready for that time when you are going to be stretched beyond what you think is your limit. So we want to hold these two truths in tension. Take care of yourself, but also get ready to be stretched. How do you know when's the right time to do either? And the answer is follow principles. So sleep is a very important principle. Get the sleep you need. Okay? But if someone asks you something legitimate and you don't expect it, you might have to sacrifice your sleep for it. If you look at that story about Mike, he is suffering. It's his own fault. He's not following principles. He stays out too late and he's drinking too much. And there's a third example right in the parable. Look at that word plowing. Plowing in the New Testament also refers to building the kingdom of God. So it refers to evangelization. The next word, tending sheep, that word refers to taking care of other Christians. And finally, eating and drinking refers to the Eucharist. So what we can learn from that is we are servants of God. So even after a hard week at work, serving God, serving other Christians, we still have to come to Mass because it's the most important prayer. One time, there was a bishop who was with St. John Paul II, and the bishop decided to thank him in Latin. So he said, Tu es bonus pastor. You are a good shepherd. And St. John Paul II, right away, he responded in Latin. He said, no, ego sum inutilis servus. I am a useless servant. That's a variation on today's gospel where Jesus says, we have to say, we are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done. That's really neat. St. John Paul II, he had that gospel message so deeply in his heart. When someone complimented him, right away he says, no, I'm a useless servant. Do we think of ourselves as worthless slaves? Not because we're worthless, but because we do the work, the worst possible work. We're willing to put up with all sorts of sufferings and inconveniences. There is this famous line, he who honestly puts himself in the last place is not astonished when others put him there too. He who is humble is not astonished when he gets humiliated. He who honestly puts himself in the last place is not astonished when others put him there too. So holy people, they fight against injustice, but not because their pride is being hurt. They fight because injustice is wrong. The morning I was praying over this reading today, I was focused on myself, serving myself. And the best thing Jesus said to me fixed my perspective. He said, I want you to focus on serving other people. And right away, I felt better. Have any of you ever had an angel come into your life? Someone who does a beautiful act of kindness and then disappears? And they don't want any gratitude, they don't want any compliments, they just do a humble work and then they fade. And Jesus wants us to be like that. And when I thought about that, I said, yeah, that's the kind of person I want to be. I want to be that person who goes, does work for people, helps them, loves them, and then I can just disappear. We will talk about that more next week. But for the meantime, by Jesus' grace, we're no longer going to be surprised when suffering comes our way. We're not going to be surprised today. There's going to be an unexpected but legitimate request made of us because we're going to be like Christ the servant. We're going to do what we have to do.